All right, we are ready for section 8.8. We're skipping a few sections in chapter 8 and jumping up to the last section of the chapter, and it is titled credit cards. Ooh. Credit cards can be a dirty word. It can be one of the biggest farces in our American culture in terms of just ripping people off every month, basically. In 2012, a statistic in your book, in 2012, the average U.S. household had $15,374 in credit card debt. That is a huge amount of debt on a credit card, specifically on a credit card because, or credit cards, because of what we're going to talk about a little bit here. And so, Section 8.8 is credit cards. One of the reasons why it's a problem to have that much debt is on a credit card is because it is an open-end installment loan, or it's also referred to as revolving credit. And the problem with this compared to, say, taking out a $15,000 loan on a car, on an automobile loan, or anything else of that type, is that those types of loans have a definite end date to the loan. You know, you'll pay off the car in 4 years or 3 years or whatever it might be. Whereas an open-end installment loan or revolving credit never has an ending date. It just keeps going and going and going, partly because of the way the minimum payment is calculated. And so if you do find yourself in debt, in terms of credit card debt, you need to make sure you stay away from paying the minimum payment. You want to try to pay more than that, and you want to try to keep chunking away at being able to pay off that card. Otherwise, they essentially have you set up in a system where if you pay the minimum payment, it will take you a long time. I mean, I'm talking more than 10 years typically, 10 to 15 to 20 years to pay off, say, that average of $15,000. And in that time period, you are paying a huge amount of interest. And so that's part of the problem with credit cards, is because they never give you a date of when it will be paid off if you stay with the minimum payment. Okay? And so credit cards have their good points, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but there are some major bad points to having credit cards and abusing them or just not using them correctly. Okay? So let's talk about calculating credit card payments and so on, the math side of this. We'll talk a little bit more about the other like ethical things and just uses of credit cards and that kind of stuff, but let's get to the math part. Okay? So every month when you have a credit card, every month in the mail you're going to get an itemized billing statement. Okay? I guess anymore it certainly could be online, not mailed to you. But and on that billing statement, these things must be on there. Your unpaid balance on the first day of the billing cycle, wherever that may be. It doesn't have to be the first of a month. It's just whatever cycle you happen to be on. The total balance on the last day of that billing cycle. So the first day balance, last day balance. A list of any purchases or cash advances or anything like that that you've made over that time period. The finance charges in dollars and cents of what you were charged in the last billing statement, and any fees you may have been subject to. Like if you made a late payment, never do that on a credit card because they're very expensive to have late payments or anything else. And so all those would need to be listed on there. The payment due date, so whenever your next payment is due, must be printed on the statement. And that minimum payment, and again, beware of this, but the minimum payment required has to be printed on the statement as well. Okay? Now, some credit cards calculate your payment, your minimum payment, and that the amount of interest that it's charged in different ways, but we're going to look at a very common method of calculating those things. And so let's do that. So let's look at a formula here, a common formula. Again, not used by every credit card, but most credit cards. A common formula for calculating the method they use to calculate the amount of interest. Okay? And so calculating interest, and this is looking at this just a little different way maybe than you've looked at credit card interest in the past. So the method that we're going to use is called the average daily balance method. So that's a method we're going to use called the average daily balance method. We're going to call it ADB. So the ADB method, so this is the way it's calculated. So ADB equals the interest here, is the sum of the unpaid balances over the month that the billing cycle is, over the billing cycle. So the sum of the unpaid balances for each day, basically is calculated by the day, divided by how many days are in that billing cycle. So we're going to add up the balance for every single day. So let's say it's a typical month. Let's say it's a 30-day month. And so we're going to add up 30 daily balances, basically, and then divide it by 30 because it's how many days were in that particular month. Okay? So this is called the average daily balance method of calculating interest. And you have some homework questions that are going to ask you about this. Okay? And so I'm going to do an example out of your book here. If you want to follow along with this example in terms of the book, if you want to look at the book to see what they did, then this example is on page 558. So if you want to look at that, you can. But this example sets up this scenario. Okay, it gives you a monthly interest rate. This is the credit card that we have. Monthly interest rate of 1.3%. I don't think I'm off the screen there, hopefully not. 1.3%, okay, of the average daily balance. So again, that's the method we're going to be using to calculate it. And this particular card we have is charging 1.3% each month. That's not an annual rate. That would be a great annual rate on a credit card. That's the monthly interest rate, okay, because that's the way it's calculated, is by month of the billing cycle, okay. For our example, again, out of the book here, we're going to start with a balance of, previous balance in this billing cycle of $1,350, okay? So these are done kind of in charts here to help you try to organize the information here and what's going on. So I'm just going to estimate my chart here. I'm not going to get real specific, but and hopefully I don't run out of room before I'm done here. But so we're going to start with an unpaid balance from the previous month of $1,350. Okay? So we still owe $1,350 from the last month, or accumulating within this bill. Okay? We're going to use the month of May for this example. Doesn't matter what month it is, but the statement's going to say that May 1st is the first day in the billing cycle. Okay? And so this is the billing date, or first day of billing cycle. Okay? Then we made a payment within this billing cycle, really from the last month, on May 8th, and so that's a good thing. We made a payment. Okay, this had no effect on money. Here, I'm going to have to extend my lines, but that one had no effect on money. That's just the first day of the billing cycle. We made a payment of $250, and so that is going to get credited to our account. So $250 is in our favor, okay, because it was a payment. On May 10th, we made a purchase of some airline tickets, okay? Is that what our example is? Yes, we charged airline tickets. So charged airline tickets. Okay, must not have been too huge of a flight, but whatever. It's $375 is the example we're using here. So we charged $375 to the account, or to the charge card. Okay, May 20th, we charged a book. We bought a book on this credit card. Okay. Must not have been a textbook because it was only, what, $57. Good textbook, I guess. Textbooks are crazy. May 28th, we charged a dinner. went out to dinner, hopefully with somebody else for this amount, more than the book. $65.30. Am I reading that correctly? Yes, I think so. $65.30? Is that right? Yes, $65.30. And then we had May 31st is the end of the billing cycle. And so that's it for this month's activity on this account. Okay, that didn't affect the balance, that's just the end of the billing cycle. Okay, and then the statement says that our next payment is due June 9th. So that's when we need to make our next payment by without having a late fee. Okay, now, actually I guess I should have written this on one side or the other. I'm going to scoot over into this little corner to do some of this calculation here, but actually I'm probably going to end up erasing this and drawing a new table on here to do this calculation with, because that's kind of the way you need to do this, is within a table. But let me at least write down our first question. So the first question that this example is asking us is, find the average daily balance. So average daily balance for this billing period. So this is a step in the process of calculating the interest. Okay, so this really is just for our information. So we'll refer back to this as we create our next table, but I need to erase this just for the space. Okay, so that's what we're basing this problem on. That's kind of the given information in this problem. Okay, so in order to calculate this interest, the monthly interest, the average daily balance interest method here, we're going to use a table, basically like the one we just had, and we're going to need to calculate the amount that we owe every day of the month, because that's how it's calculated. Okay, so we're going to use a table, essentially the same thing that we just had. We're going to start it out with looking at the date of the billing cycle. Okay, so if you want to create something similar to this as you're taking notes. Okay, so we're starting out on May 1st, right? That was the first day of our billing cycle, it said in our given information. Okay, the next thing we want to look at is the balance on that day. Well, the balance on that day, if you'll remember, we started from the previous month owing $1,350. That was our first balance, balance on the first day of the billing cycle. Okay. The next day that we charged something, let's put in a number of days here that we owed that amount of money. Okay. Well, the next day that there was any activity was May 8th. So we essentially have 7 days, the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, before we do this. We have 7 days that we owe that amount of money before we charge something else or make a payment or whatever. Okay. And so our next transaction was on the 8th, and so our 7 days were the 1st through the 7th. That's the number. That's the dates that we owed this amount of money. Okay. Then on May 8th we made a payment. If you'll remember, we made a payment of $250. So now our balance goes down to $1,100 for the next however many days until we do some other kind of transaction. Okay. So our next day that we do a transaction is on May 8th, or on May 10th, sorry, and we actually made a charge that day. And so we only go with this lower balance for only 2 days. So we have 2 days there. It would be the 8th and the 9th of the month where we have that $1,100 balance. Then if you remember, we charged an airline ticket, and that cost of that airline ticket was $375, so now our balance goes up to $1,475. Okay. The next day that we had a transaction, I believe, was on May 20th. that correct, from our last table? May 20th, we charged that book, okay? And so our balance goes up by that amount, okay? And so if I can see that in my chart here, it was 5750. Is that what I wrote down? Hopefully that's what I wrote down. It was 5750, and so our new balance ends up being 1532.50. Okay. So we went from the 10th to the before the 20th. On the 20th it changed. From the 10th essentially to the 19th because it changed on the 20th. So we went from the 10th to the 19th with this balance right here. So that's 10 days. Okay. The next day we did something, actually we charged something, was the 28th. And remember we went out to dinner. And so that dinner, I believe, was what, $65.30. And so that took us up to an ending balance of $1597.80. Okay, again, adding the amount from the last table we did. So we went from the 20th to essentially the 27th at this balance, because on the 28th it changed to that. So from the 20th to the 27th, that's 7 days. Okay, sorry, that's 8 days. From 0 to 7 is 8 days. Okay, then the end of the month is May 31st. That's the end of the billing cycle and so on. And so we went from the 28th to the 31st, and so 28, 29, 30, 31, we went 4 days with having this balance, our biggest balance of the month. Okay? And so if we total up the number of days here, we would have 31 days altogether. All right? Now, if you'll notice, I haven't done anything in this last column, and I was kind of leaving that till the end. I didn't want to do it for each day as we progressed. I don't know if it would be more confusing that way or not. But basically what we want to do in this last column is create the product. So we're going to take the product of these two columns and put it in this column. Okay? So we're going to take this 1,350 and multiply it by that 7 days, because that's the balance we had for 7 days. Okay? I wrote all these numbers down. That would equal, where'd that come out to? $9,450. Okay? We're going to take this balance, that for these 2 days, and multiply it by the 2 days that we owed that amount. And that's an easy one, $2,200. Okay? Sorry, I'm mixing my notation there. The 10 days that we owed this amount, so $1,475, we're going to multiply by 10. So another easy one, $14,750. 8 days we had this balance, and so we'll multiply 1532.50 times 8, and what does that one come out to? 22,260. Or I'm sorry, 12,260. So $12,260. And then finally we had the 1597.80 for 4 days. And so that one came out to $6391.20. Okay? So you just take each balance for how many days it was and multiply that out. Essentially you're adding up those balances for those numbers of days. Okay? Then we're going to add up all those numbers in this column. And in this case, all those numbers add up to $45,051.20. All right? And so that's what they all add up to. We had that balance going in those days for 31 days. And so we're going to, I'm going to erase the bottom of my chart here since I don't need it. We're going to plug that into the calculation, or formula, I mean, that we had for calculating the average daily balance, interest. Okay? So the ADB, remember, is calculated by the total of all the days, average balances. So we're going to take that 45,051.20, and we would divide it by the number of days that we have for the total billing cycle. So in this case, that's 31. Okay, this is the formula that I put on the board before I even set up with the charts. all right? And so if we do that calculation right there, it should come out to be 1453, sorry, 1453.26. $1,453. So basically what that calculation is doing is averaging all these amounts that we owed throughout the month and the number of days that we had, and we're averaging that as an average balance over the entire month. So we're not paying interest on this amount for the whole month because we didn't have that much charged to the card the whole month. But we also don't get to use that amount, our lowest amount. It's an average for all the days. Okay? So that's the ADB, and that's what they asked us to find. Find the average daily balance for this billing period, and so it's $1,453.26. All right? The second question, that was just the first question. The second question within this example was to find the interest to be paid. So find the interest to be paid on June 1st, which is the next day after this cycle closes. But again, we don't have to make that payment, well, it was on the last chart, we don't have to make that payment until June 9th, but it's calculated on the next day after this. Okay, so in other words, what this question is asking, what is the interest that we have to pay on the balance that we carried throughout this month? And so the balance was calculated to be this, as an average daily balance, so that's what we're paying the interest on. Okay? So we will take that, I'm going to erase all this because I don't have room to do what we need to do. We need that number right there. I'm going to write it right here, 1453.26. That's the answer to the A part. We need that number to be able to do our next calculation. Okay, being able to calculate the interest on this average daily balance. Now the interest actually is a relatively easy calculation. It's interest equals principal times rate times time. Okay, comes from our simple interest chapter. So we're just paying simple interest here. It's just complicated a little bit by calculating that ADB balance. Okay, so we're just going to take the principal, which is that average daily balance, so $1,453.26. Okay, remember our rate from our given amount back when we started this problem was 1.3%, so changed to a decimal that would be 0.13. And time in this case, because this is a monthly interest rate, our time is just 1 month, because we're just doing this for one billing cycle. Okay? And so when you multiply those two together, you're going to get the amount of interest that you owe on this money at the end of the month, the average daily balance, how much interest you owe on that average daily balance at the end of the month, and it comes out to $18.89. So that's the interest that you're paying to borrow that much money averaged out over the month. So the answer to this question is $18.89. Okay? Our C part of the question is, find the balance due. On June 1st. Well, that's a relatively easy question. All we do is take the amount of interest that we're having to pay, right, and add it to the balance from May 31st, which I erased that because it was part of the table that I just had. But our balance at the end of the month was $1597.80, wasn't it? I believe. So $1597.80. And so this is the C question. 1597.80 was the balance at the end of the month, but we have to pay the interest for that month, and so we're going to add 1889, and so that's going to add up to 1669. So that's our new balance on the card at the end of May, beginning of June, June 1st. So that's how much we now owe because we have to pay our interest from May. And so that would be our if we were doing this again for June, this would be our beginning balance for our table for the June calculation now. Okay? So this answer is 16, let me try that again. 16.89. Sorry, 69. Okay? last question here, it actually has kind of a lot in it. Let me read, I'm gonna grab my notes here, and read what this question is asking us to do, okay? This question is saying that this particular credit card that we're using, that has this 1.3% interest for the month and so on, the other conditions within this credit card are that it requires a minimum monthly payment of $10, okay? Unless the balance is more than $360, which ours is. If it's more than $360, then the minimum payment is calculated by 1/36 of the balance due, okay? And it's rounded up to the nearest dollar. Always round it up to the next dollar, okay? So this question is, find the minimum monthly payment. For this particular card. Again, not every card works that way. Okay, so find the minimum monthly payment. Well, if we took our 1669, right, and divided it by the 36, because if it's 1/36, so we would take the 69, and we're going to divide it by the 36 that was in the agreement to the card, because it's 1/36 of the balance. Another way of looking at that is that we're going to take this and multiply it by 1/36. Okay, same thing. Multiplying by 1/36 and dividing by 36 is the same thing. And so this comes out to be, what does that calculation give us? And rounded up to the next nearest dollar is $45. So our June 1st payment would be $45. Minimum payment would be $45. All right? Okay, now I know that was a lot for just one big question, really. Okay? If you want those steps kind of outlined for you, or summarized for you, you can look at page 560 in your book, and there's a yellow box right in the center of the page that summarizes those steps. You know what? I've talked at you long enough in this video, but I was going to read the advantages and disadvantages to credit cards from page 561, and you really should take a look at that. Okay? And there's a little thing at the bottom that starts comparing them to debit cards. Okay? And then there's a table on page 562 about credit reports. And so if you want some information about credit reports and what a credit score means and different degrees of credit reports and so on, there's a table and some information on that page. Okay? But hopefully this gives you some information on how to do this assignment. But there are several questions in this assignment that just have to do with using the credit card also. Just, you know, kind of general questions about credit cards and that kind of thing too. They're not all calculations like this. So, okay, so hopefully you can do this assignment. Thanks.